Satyajit Ray's The Adventures of Feluda, The House of Death. Narrated by Rajiv Dadia. Dungru's story. Dungru laid his instrument on the grass that was still wet with the morning dew and began singing. He had a pretty good voice. The song he was now singing was one he had heard only once before. Yet he had picked it up, almost without making an effort. It was a song a beggar usually sang just outside Hanuman Fatak. But he played an instrument too. Shyam Gurung, the local greengrocer, had an instrument like that. Dungru had borrowed it for the day, but had already realized playing it wasn't half as easy as singing. Who knew running a bow over a few strings could be so difficult? Dungru's voice rose. There was a maize field in front of him, in which a couple of buffaloes and 3 goats were roaming freely. There was no one else in sight. Behind him was a very steep hill. Just under it, not far from the mound on which he sat, stood an almond tree. The little house in the distance with a tiled roof was where he lived. His father owned this maize field. There were other hills and several mountain peaks dimly visible through the morning mist. One of these, called Machipuch, because it was shaped like a fishtail, had started to turn pink. Dungru began the second line of the song, but had to break off abruptly. A strange rumble in the hill behind him made him spring to his feet and jump to one side. In the next instant, a large boulder rolled down the hill and went past him, crushing his instrument and missing him by inches. Dungru could hardly believe his luck, but before his heartbeat could get back to normal, something else happened. Something much more unexpected and far worse than a rolling boulder. But like the boulder, it came crashing down the hill, struck against the almond tree and fell to the ground, together with several broken branches. What on earth was that? He gaped, his mouth hanging open. Good heavens, it was a man. Not just any man, but a well-dressed babu, probably from a big city. There was blood on his head, his face and chin. One of his legs was folded under him at a very odd angle. Was he dead? No, Dungru saw him move his head. Then he remembered the others. There was a group of men camping out near the spring across the main road. Dungru had often stared in amazement at the color of their hair and their beards. No one that he knew in his own village had hair like that, and certainly no one had a beard. But if anyone could help this man, it had to be those men. They knew Dungru. They had bought maize from him and given him money almost every day. Dungru began running. "Hi, Joe! Come here quickly!" shouted one of them on seeing Dungru. "Why? What's up?" Dungru stood panting. He couldn't speak their language. In fact, he was too breathless to speak at all. So he just rolled his eyes and stuck out his tongue. Then he pointed at the hill. The man caught on immediately. "Okay, Jeep, go, Jeep!" Their Jeep had all the colors of a rainbow. Dungru had never seen a vehicle like that. He jumped into it. Joe, Mark, Dennis, and Bruce joined him. "Jesus Christ!" one of them exclaimed softly when Dungru took them to the exact spot where the injured man still lay on the ground. All of them bent over him. Mark, who had left studying medicine in Minnesota, checked his pulse. Then they picked him up and placed him carefully in the jeep. The nearest hospital was in Kathmandu, 33 kilometers from here. Chapter 1. There was something special about Feluda's palm. The line called headline, that's supposed to indicate one's intelligence, was exceptionally long and clear. Feluda did not believe in palmistry, but had read up on the subject. Lal Mohan Babu, who believed in it wholeheartedly, had once asked Feluda to show him his palm. Feluda had obliged with a grin, but Lal Mohan Babu had failed to share his amusement. He had inspected the headline, then said, "Amazing, amazing." After this, he had opened his own palm, looked at it and sighed deeply. I had to try very hard not to laugh. One of my uncles could read palms. I had heard him make reasonably accurate statements about one's past and make predictions for the future that often turned out to be true. Some people, I was told, could look at a person's face and tell him about his future. But I didn't know it is possible to place one's little finger in the middle of a person's forehead and reveal what the future had in store for him. I saw this being done only when we visited Puri. Incessant power shedding and a temperature of 110 degrees Fahrenheit had driven us out of Calcutta. The power crisis had got so bad that Lal Mohan Babu's latest novel could not be printed in April. He was most annoyed at this, particularly as it was his first crime thriller with a touch of the supernatural. As a matter of fact, it was Feluda who had given him the idea. Ghosts and spooks go very well with flickering candlelight. Lal Mohan Babu had taken this seriously and written Frankenstein in Frankfurt. When he learnt it could not be published as scheduled, he came straight to our house and said, "We cannot go on living in this city. Besides, you've heard of the Skylab, haven't you?" There was really no reason to assume the Skylab would come crashing down on Calcutta, but Lal Mohan Babu kept saying that a large portion of it might, since the entire city of Calcutta appeared to have got the evil eye. Feluda is normally extremely adaptable. I have seen him remain perfectly unperturbed even under the most trying circumstances. If he had to spend a whole night at a railway station and the waiting room happened to be full, he'd quite happily stretch out on the platform. But there was one thing he couldn't do without: reading in bed for a few hours before going to sleep. Weeks and weeks of power cuts had deprived him of this one luxury he allowed himself to indulge in. This had made him rather cross. He had tried practicing card tricks, written limericks, and tried many other things to amuse himself. Long periods of darkness, I had hoped, would result in more crime, but sadly, no interesting cases had come his way. He was, in short, utterly bored. This was perhaps the reason why he appeared to agree with Lal Mohan Babu and said, "Really, the city of joy has been causing us a lot of grief, hasn't it? I can put up with the physical discomfort, but constant disturbances at work, having to give up reading at night, not even being able to think because of mosquitoes. These are very difficult to live with." "Orissa, I hear, has got excess power," Lal Mohan Babu observed. This led to a discussion about Orissa, Puri, the sea beach in Puri, and the hotel called Neelachal that had recently opened there, and was owned by Lal Mohan Babu's landlord's classmate. Unfortunately, it turned out that we couldn't get reservations before mid-June. "Never mind, we'll go in June," said Feluda. Eventually, we left on 21st June by the Puri Express. It was decided that Lal Mohan Babu's driver would take his car and get to Puri by road a day later. We might have gone by car ourselves, but Lal Mohan Babu had a sudden attack of nerves at the last minute and said, "Suppose there's a storm or something on the way? Suppose we get stranded?" But he agreed having our own car was a good idea, since we intended visiting a few other places, hence the two different travel arrangements. Our journey was uneventful except for the fourth passenger in our fourth berth compartment. He was the only exciting thing that happened. First, we saw him fit a cigarette into a holder that seemed to be made of gold. Then he took out a gold-plated lighter. "At least 3,000 rupees. Feluda whispered. "To light it." His cigarette case was also golden, as were his cufflinks, the frames of his glasses, and the 3 rings he wore. While climbing down from the upper berth, one of his feet accidentally brushed against Lal Mohan Babu's shoulder. He gave an embarrassed smile at this and said, "Sorry." One of his teeth, we all noted, flashed as he opened his mouth. When he got off at Puri with us and disappeared with a coolie and his luggage, Lal Mohan Babu sighed. "We didn't even get to know the man's name. Have you ever seen so much gold on a man, Tapesh?" he asked. "There was a very easy way to find out his name, Lal Mohan Babu," Feluda replied. "Didn't you see the reservation list at Howrah? That man is called M.L. Hingorani." Chapter 2. "This is a 6-star hotel," Lal Mohan Babu declared, nodding with approval after checking in at Neelachal. No hotel can claim to be 5-star unless it has a swimming pool, and 5-star is the maximum rating a hotel can get. Can you spot a swimming pool anywhere, Lal Mohan Babu? Or are you counting the sea as this hotel's very...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?